Chapter 1. The breaking of Stonyth tomb should not have opened. Elena's hands were still bleeding from the climb when she pressed her weight against the ancient door, her shoulder, screaming in protest. The stone moved impossible, after 2 centuries sealed with a sound like thunder breaking underground. Cold air rushed past her face, carrying the scent of old incense and something darker, something that made her lungs seize. She stumbled through the opening and fell hard against flagstone floors that hadn't felt footsteps since her great-great-grandmother was young. Behind her, the shouts grew closer. Men with torches and accusations. Men who believed the lies Marcus had told them. About her father's death, about the missing church funds, about her. In 3 days, they'd stripped everything: her family name, her father's reputation, her right to walk through the village without stones following. The tomb was her last mistake, or her last hope. Elena dragged herself deeper into darkness, away from the fractured doorway where moonlight spilled across carved warnings she couldn't read. Her dress caught on something, a fallen candelabra, maybe, or bones, and she heard fabric tear. Good. Let them find scraps. Let them think she'd fallen into some crack in the earth and save them the trouble of a hanging. Her breath came in ragged gasps that echoed wrong in the space. Too vast, too quiet beneath her panic. Then she heard it. A breath that wasn't hers. Elena froze, her spine pressed against something cold and vertical, a column, maybe, or a sarcophagus standing upright. Her eyes hadn't adjusted to the dark, but she felt the space rearrange itself around another presence. Something that had been waiting. You opened it, a voice said. Male, low, accented in a way she couldn't place, vowels shaped by some older version of their language. After 200 years of silence, a mortal breaks my door. Not the door. My door. Elena's hand found her father's knife at her belt. The blade was small, practical, meant for cutting sutures and trimming bandages. Back when she'd assisted him. Back when she'd had a future. Stay back, she managed, though her voice shook. I'm armed. A sound that might have been laughter, dry as autumn leaves. Yes, I can smell the iron. I can also smell your blood, clever girl. You've painted yourself an invitation. Her bleeding palms, her torn dress, the gash on her temple from where Marcus had thrown her against the cellar wall before she'd escaped. Footsteps, bare against stone, measured, unhurried. The men hunting you, the voice continued, closer now, circling. They believe you murdered someone. A father? No, they think you dishonored him, stole from him. The stories aren't clear, but their torches are bright. You can see them? Elena turned, trying to track him in the dark. From in here, I can hear their heartbeats. 23 men. 3 have killed before. 1 is lying about why he joined the hunt. A pause. You're wondering if you've traded one death for another. She was. God help her. She was. I have a proposal, he said. And now he was directly in front of her, close enough that she felt the displacement of air. Still she couldn't see him. You opened my prison. The door recognized your blood-old magic, older than your church, worked into the stone. That makes you either catastrophically unlucky or precisely what I've waited for. Elena tightened her grip on the knife. I don't understand. You will. Something brushed her wrist fingers, she thought, though they were cold enough to be carved from ice. The knife fell from her nerveless hand, clattering on stone. Your choices are simple. Go back through that door and let them hang you for crimes you didn't commit, or stay here, in the dark, with something you've been taught to fear more than death. What are you? But she already knew. Her grandmother's stories, her father's warnings about the old places, the sealed places, the places where things that shouldn't exist had been locked away during the church's purge. I am Lucian Constantine, Draven, Lord of the House of Thorns, last king of the night courts before your ancestors drove us underground. His voice carried weight like a title, like a threat. I am 247 years old. I have not fed in 200 years. And you, mortal girl, with blood on your hands and terror in your heart, have just become the most interesting thing to happen to me in centuries. The torchlight reached the doorway. Voices shouted, Marcus's voice loudest among them. Righteous and false, choose quickly, Lucian said. Dawn is 4 hours away. If they find you with me, they'll burn us both. If you run now, you might reach the forest. I can't. The words broke from her. There's nowhere left. Then we have an accord. His hand caught her still ice cold, impossibly strong, and pulled her deeper into the tomb, away from the light. Stay silent. Stay close. And when the sun rises, we'll discuss what you've cost me, and what I might cost you. The tomb swallowed them both as the first torch crossed the threshold. As Marcus called her name like a prayer that had curdled into a curse, Elena followed a dead man into darkness and felt, against all reason, the first thread of something that wasn't quite hope. But it was close enough to keep her moving. Chapter 2. The weight of shadows. They moved through passages that hadn't seen light in generations. Lucien's hand, an iron shackle around her wrist. Elena stumbled twice over debris she couldn't see. Fallen stone, scattered bones, the residue of whatever violent ceiling had locked him away. Each time, his grip tightened, kept her upright, dragged her forward with inhuman certainty. Behind them, the voices faded. The torches retreated. Marcus had looked inside and found nothing but darkness and old death. He hadn't been brave enough to follow. "Here," Lucien said finally, and released her. Elena collapsed against a wall, gasping. Her legs shook. Her hands burned where the cuts had reopened during their flight. She heard him move away, fluid, silent except when he chose to make sound, and then came the scratch of flint, the catch of flame. A single candle bloomed to life, held in his hand. She saw him for the first time. Tall, impossibly so, or perhaps the low ceiling of the chamber made him seem larger than life. Dark hair fell past his shoulders, tangled and unkempt in a way that suggested centuries of neglect. His face was sharp angles and aristocratic bones, beautiful in the way old paintings were beautiful, remote, untouchable, slightly unreal. His eyes caught the candlelight and threw it back wrong, reflective like an animal's. He wore clothes from another age. A long coat, once fine, now moth-eaten and dust-covered. Beneath it, the remnants of a shirt that might have been white when he'd been sealed away. He looked like a corpse dressed for burial. He looked like a king dethroned. "You're staring," he observed, setting the candle in a wall sconce that had somehow survived 200 years. The flame illuminated a small chamber, more crypt than room, with a stone slab that might have been a bed and walls carved with symbols that hurt to look at directly. Elena's voice failed. Started again. "You're real." Disappointingly so. He moved to the far corner, his back to her, shoulders rigid. "I'd hoped in my more optimistic moments that I'd simply gone mad, that the darkness had finally eaten my mind and I was imagining everything. Your presence suggests otherwise." She pressed her bleeding palm against her skirt, trying to stop the flow. "How did you survive? 200 years without?" She couldn't say it. "Without feeding, without blood." Badly, the word was clipped. "The House of Thorns has always specialized in endurance. We sleep deeper than other bloodlines, require less, last longer. It's made us excellent at sieges and terrible at diplomacy." He turned, and the candlelight caught his face at an angle that emphasized the hollows beneath his cheekbones, the darkness under his eyes. "I was the last of my house when they sealed me. The church thought starvation more holy than a stake. They were wrong about the holy part. They may have been right about the rest." Elena watched him carefully. He moved like something wounded, controlled, but barely. Like her father's patience in those final moments before the pain broke them. "You said the door recognized my blood. Why?" "Old magic works through lineages. Someone in your family helped seal this place or help build it." His gaze fixed on her with unnerving intensity. "The wards were designed to open only for that bloodline, only when the descendant was desperate enough to bleed on the threshold. A failsafe, perhaps, or a prophecy. I stopped trying to understand human magic around the time they buried me alive." She should have been terrified. Every story, every warning, every midnight tale said vampires were monsters, soulless, hungry, corrupting everything they touched. But Lucien looked at her the way her father had looked at his most complicated patients. Assessing, clinical, keeping something desperate locked behind his eyes. "You're afraid of me," she said suddenly. His expression didn't change. "Don't be absurd. Not afraid I'll hurt you. Afraid of what you might do to me." Elena pushed herself upright, ignoring the protest of her exhausted body. "You haven't fed in 200 years. I'm bleeding. But you're standing as far from me as this room allows." Silence. Long enough that she thought he wouldn't answer. "The House of Thorns," he said finally, voice soft and dangerous, "build our power on a single law, consent or starvation. We do not take without permission. We do not compel. We do not hunt those who cannot comprehend the choice." His hands clenched at his sides. 2 centuries haven't made me forget what I am. They've made me doubt my ability to remember." Elena felt something shift in her chest, not quite sympathy, but recognition. "You think you'll lose control." I think you're the first living thing to speak to me since 1-6 for 2, and you smell like survival and desperation and every meal I've denied myself. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. I think if you offered, I might not stop. And I will not become the monster they said I was. The candle flickered. Somewhere deeper in the tomb, water dripped with metronomic patience. What happens at dawn? Elena asked. I sleep. True sleep, the kind your kind experiences every night, but deeper. Involuntary. Vulnerable. He studied her with those unsettling eyes. You could walk out. Find a magistrate who isn't in Marcus's pocket. Tell them where I am. They'd come with priests and stakes and end what the church started. And if I don't, then you stay here, in the dark with me. And when I wake tomorrow night, we negotiate the terms of our survival. He moved then, crossing to the stone slab, settling onto it with the careful movements of someone long accustomed to discomfort. The men may come back. If they do, there's a passage behind the eastern wall, third stone from the floor, press twice. It leads to the catacombs. You'll be lost, but you'll be lost alive. Why are you helping me? Lucien lay back, folding his hands across his chest like a carved effigy. Because you opened the door, Elena. Her name in his mouth sounded like a secret. Because I've been alone long enough to know what it looks like in someone else. And because his eyes closed. I'm too tired to pretend I don't want you to stay. The sun rose somewhere above them, unfelt and unseen. Lucien's breathing slowed, deepened, stopped. Elena sat in the candlelight, watching a dead man sleep, and wondered which of them was truly trapped. Chapter 3. The things we notice. Elena didn't sleep. She sat with her back against the cold stone wall, watching Lucien's unnaturally still form on the slab. Her father had taught her to recognize death, the absence of breath, the stillness of chest, the particular quality of flesh when life had fled. Lucien exhibited all these signs, yet she knew he wasn't dead. Not truly. Just elsewhere. The candle burned down to a stub. She found more in a niche carved into the wall, dozens of them, old and brittle but still usable. Someone had prepared this place for a long imprisonment. Someone had wanted him to have light at least. During his conscious hours. It was a cruelty wrapped in mercy. As gray dawnlight began filtering through cracks in the distant ceiling, Elena finally allowed herself to explore. The chamber was larger than she'd first realized, extending back into darkness that the candlelight couldn't quite penetrate. She found a table carved from the living rock, its surface covered in scratches, marks grouped in fives, hundreds of them, maybe thousands. Years counted out in tally marks. She found books, their pages brittle and spotted with mold. She couldn't read the language, Latin perhaps, or something older. One volume fell open to an illustration, a grand hall filled with figures in ancient dress, their eyes reflecting light like animals. At the center, a man who might have been Lucien, younger somehow, wearing a crown of twisted thorns. She found empty wine bottles, a chest set with pieces carved from bone, a violin without strings, evidence of a man trying to stay sane in the dark. Her hand throbbed. She'd wrapped it in fabric torn from her underskirt, but the bleeding had soaked through. She needed to clean it properly, needed water and bandages, and her father's medical kit that had been confiscated along with everything else she'd owned. A sound made her turn. Lucien remained motionless on the slab, but his fingers had twitched. Once, barely perceptible, Elena approached slowly, candle held high. In the better light, she could see details she'd missed before. His skin had a translucent quality, like parchment stretched to thin. Dark veins traced patterns beneath the surface, his circulatory system visible, empty, a network of rivers that had run dry. His lips were cracked. His hands, folded on his chest, showed tendons and bones to clearly defined. He was starving, had been starving for centuries, and still he'd refused to take from her. She thought of Marcus, who'd taken everything, her reputation, her safety, her father's legacy. Who'd smiled while he lied, who'd touched her arm with false gentleness while he'd maneuvered her toward ruin, who'd never asked for consent, only assumed his right to whatever he wanted. Lucien had asked for nothing. Elena set the candle down and sat beside the slab, close enough to feel the cold radiating from his body. I don't know if you can hear me, she said quietly. Father said patients under laudanum sometimes remembered voices from their sleep. Perhaps it's the same for you. No response. Not even that small twitch. I'm staying, she continued. Not because I'm trapped, you showed me the way out. And not because I'm grateful, though I suppose I am. She examined her wrapped palm, the blood seeping through. I'm staying because for the first time in 3 days, I'm not afraid. Isn't that strange? I should be terrified of you. Instead, I'm just tired. The confession surprised her with its honesty. Marcus told everyone I poisoned my father to steal his money. The truth is, I watched him die over 3 months from a cancer I couldn't cure. And when he finally went, Marcus saw an opportunity. Her voice hardened. He courted me during the mourning period, said he wanted to protect me, to honor my father's memory. I almost believed him. Then he started asking about the practice, about my father's patients, about who owed money and who had secrets. She laughed bitterly. I refused to give him the records. So he manufactured a scandal missing church funds, mysteriously deposited in my father's accounts just before his death. Evidence so perfectly placed that even I wondered if I'd missed something in my grief. Lucien's chest remained still. His face showed nothing. The magistrate believed Marcus. Everyone did. He's charming, respected, trusted. I'm just the spinster daughter of a dead physician, too educated for my station, too sharp-tongued for propriety. Elena touched the edge of the stone slab, felt its glacial cold. They would have hanged me tomorrow. A public execution, to show what happens to ungrateful women who betray their betters. The quality of silence in the chamber changed, though she couldn't say how. But you, she said, looking at his still face, you asked permission. You warned me. You gave me choices even when you had all the power. She unwrapped her hand, looked at the angry red cuts across her palm. So, yes, I'm staying. Because I'd rather trust a monster who asks than a man who takes without asking. Hours passed. The gray light strengthened, then began to fade. Elena found a corner to relieve herself and carefully, maintaining what dignity she could. She discovered a small spring trickling through the rock, the water clean enough to drink and wash her wounds properly. She tore more fabric from her ruined dress to make better bandages. She was rewrapping her palm when she noticed the change. Lucien's fingers moved. Not a twitch this time, but a deliberate curl, unfurling. His chest rose with a breath that sounded like wind through a crypt. His eyes opened slowly, as if the lids were weighted. He stared at the ceiling for a long moment, orienting himself. Then his gaze shifted to her, sitting cross-legged on the floor beside his slab, hands wrapped in makeshift bandages. You stayed, he said. His voice was rougher than before, scraped raw. I told you I would. I thought. He sat up slowly, carefully, moving like someone testing the limits of an injured body. I thought you'd reconsider in the light. Such as it is. Elena met his eyes, still reflective, still inhuman, but somehow less frightening than they'd been. I counted your tally marks. 73,412 days. That's what you scratched into the table. His expression went carefully blank. Approximate. You stopped counting 6 years ago. The marks end abruptly. I ran out of table. But his voice carried a lie, transparent as water. And hope, I suppose. There's only so many days one can count before it becomes torture instead of meditation. She let it pass. When did you last feed? Before they sealed you? 4 days prior. A willing donor paid handsomely, who understood the terms. He swung his legs off the slab, boots touching stone. The House of Thorns maintained contracts with specific families. They provided blood. We provided protection, healing, extended lifespans for their bloodlines. It was civilized. And then the church decided civilization meant eradication. His hands clenched. But you didn't stay to discuss history. What do you want from me, Elena? She stood, meeting him as an equal, despite the foot of height he had on her. I want to know why the door recognized my blood. I want to know what happens next. And she hesitated. I want to know if you meant it, that we might survive this. Together. Lucien looked at her for a long moment, his ancient eyes reading something in her face she hadn't known was written there. Then we begin negotiations, he said. And you tell me everything about Marcus, about the men who hunt you, and about why someone with your bloodline would risk opening a vampire's tomb. Elena nodded. And you'll teach me about houses and blood oaths, and how to survive in a world I didn't know existed. A fair trade. He extended his hand, still cold. Still inhuman but steady. She took it. Outside. Night fell completely. Their pact had begun. Chapter 4. Threads of truth. They sat across from each other at the stone table, a single candle burning between them. Lucien had produced a bottle of wine from some hidden cache, red, ancient, probably priceless. He didn't drink. Elena did, grateful. for the warmth spreading through her chest, dulling the edges of exhaustion and fear. "Tell me about Marcus," Lucian said. His hands were folded on the table, motionless. She'd noticed he controlled every gesture with deliberate precision, as if afraid of what might happen if he moved too quickly. Elena took another sip. "Marcus Thorne, 32, merchant's son who climbed into respectability through strategic marriages, his sister to the magistrate's brother, his cousin to the bishop's nephew. He has a network of influence that covers 3 counties." She met Lucian's gaze. "And he wants my father's medical practice, not for healing, for access." "Access to what?" "Information, secrets." She traced the rim of her glass. "My father treated everyone, nobles, merchants, servants, criminals. People tell their physicians things they'd never confess to priests. Ailments, fears, indiscretions. Marcus understands that knowledge is currency, more valuable than gold when applied correctly." Lucian's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. "Recognition, perhaps. So he courted you to gain legitimate access to those records. And when I refused, he destroyed me instead." The wine made her bold. "He's patient, methodical. The missing church funds appeared in my father's accounts 6 weeks after the funeral, just long enough for my grief to seem suspicious, my isolation to seem guilty. By the time I realized what he'd done, the magistrate had already signed the warrant. The men who chased you here, they believe his story. Most of them. Some just want excitement. A witch hunt without the witch." She laughed bitterly. "Though, I suppose I found something worse than witchcraft in the end." "You found survival." Lucian leaned back, the chair creaking under his weight. "Now tell me why you ran to a sealed tomb. This place isn't marked on any map. It's not local legend. How did you know where to find me?" Elena hesitated. This was the part she hadn't wanted to examine too closely. "My father had a journal, private, kept locked in his desk. After he died, I found it among his papers. Marcus didn't know to look for it." She pulled the small leather volume from her pocket, its cover worn smooth. "He wrote about old places, sites where the church had buried things during the purge. He'd been researching. Researching what? Alternative medicine. He'd reached the limits of what conventional treatment could achieve. Patients dying from diseases he couldn't cure, injuries he couldn't heal." She opened the journal to a page marked with ribbon. "He wrote about vampire blood, its properties, the healing potential." The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Lucian's voice went very quiet. "Your father experimented with vampire blood?" "No," he theorized. "He documented stories, collected samples from old battlefields, tried to understand the mechanisms." Elena kept her voice steady. "He never used it, never tested it. But he believed." She met Lucian's dangerous gaze. "He believed vampires weren't evil, just different, and that the church had destroyed something valuable when they drove your kind underground." Silence stretched between them, sharp as a blade. "That's heresy," Lucian said finally. "In your world and mine, humans who sympathize with vampires are killed. Vampires who reveal themselves to humans are executed by their own houses for endangering the bloodlines. I know, and yet you opened my door, knowing what I was." Elena closed the journal. "I opened it because I had nowhere else to go. But I stayed because my father spent his last years trying to prove vampires were worth saving. The least I can do is not prove him wrong." Something shifted in Lucian's expression, surprise, maybe, or the ghost of old grief. "Your father was a fool, probably. A dangerous, idealistic fool who could have been killed for those journals. Almost certainly. And you're just like him." It wasn't quite a question. Elena smiled despite herself. "Unfortunately." Lucian stood abruptly, began pacing the small chamber with restless energy. "You need to understand what you've walked into. The House of Thorns is extinct. I'm all that remains. But there are other houses. The House of Ravens controls the northern territories. The House of Vipers holds the east. The House of Mirrors has the coastal cities." His hands clenched and unclenched. "They've maintained secrecy for 2 centuries, adapted, thrived in the shadows while humans forgot we existed. Then why were you sealed away?" "Because I refused to hide." He turned to face her, and for a moment she saw the king he'd been, proud, defiant, unbending. The other houses wanted accommodation, wanted to survive by becoming invisible. I wanted recognition, coexistence, treaties instead of terror. His voice went flat. The church attacked during negotiations, killed my house, burned our holdings, scattered our bloodlines. The other houses didn't intervene. They let us fall as a lesson. This is what happens to those who reach for the light. Elena absorbed this, piecing together implications. And now I've opened your tomb, released you. If the other houses find out, they'll kill us both. You for knowing too much, me for being foolish enough to let you live. He returned to the table, sat heavily. The only reason you're safe right now is that no one knows you're here. Once Marcus realizes you didn't die in the forest, once he starts searching more carefully, he'll find the tomb, and when he does, he'll bring priests. The wards are broken. Anyone can enter now. We can't stay here. Where can we go? Elena asked. I'm wanted for murder. You're legally dead, theologically damned, politically catastrophic. Lucian rubbed his face, a gesture so human it startled her. There's a place, a safe house, maintained by those sympathetic to the old houses. Merchants, scholars, others who remember the treaties. It's 3 days' travel, through territories controlled by the House of Ravens. Will they help us? If they believe I'm worth the risk. If they think I have something to offer beyond ancient history and dangerous idealism. His eyes met hers. And if they believe you're not simply a liability I'll discard once you're no longer useful. Elena thought about this, about trust and survival and the strange partnership forming between them. What do we need? Documentation. Proof of your father's research. It changes everything if there's a human physician willing to advocate for vampire-human cooperation. His journals, his samples, his correspondence. Lucian leaned forward. Can you get them? Marcus has them by now. He'll have searched my father's house, taken everything of value. Then we take them back. That's insane. The house will be watched, probably sealed by the magistrate. Elena's heart hammered. And I'm supposed to be dead or dying in the forest. If anyone sees me, they won't. Lucian's smile was sharp and cold. Because you'll have help. The kind humans built churches to protect themselves from. She understood then, the full weight of what he was offering. You want to go back to the village. I want to remind them why their grandparents sealed me away instead of just killing me. He extended his hand across the table. One night, we retrieve your father's research, leave evidence you died elsewhere, and disappear before dawn. Then we run for the safe house and hope we survive long enough to matter. Elena looked at his outstretched hand, cold, inhuman, offering something between partnership and damnation. She thought of Marcus sleeping comfortably in her father's house, wearing her father's reputation like stolen clothes. She thought of the men who'd chased her with torches and righteousness, never questioning the lies they'd been fed. She thought of her father's journal, his years of careful research, his belief that monsters might be worth understanding. She took Lucian's hand. One night, she agreed. Then we run. His grip tightened, still controlled, still careful, but carrying the promise of violence beneath the restraint. Then we become the nightmare Marcus deserves, Lucian said softly. And pray the other houses don't notice until it's too late. Outside, storm clouds gathered. Inside, two outcasts forged an alliance built on desperation and the fragile hope that survival might lead to something more. Chapter 5. The house of Lethe left the tomb 2 hours before midnight, when the moon was hidden behind storm clouds and the village lay sleeping beneath a blanket of false peace. Elena wore Lucian's coat too large, smelling of dust and centuries, but dark enough to hide her ruined dress. He'd found her a hood, insisted she keep her face covered. Your features are known, he'd said. Mine are legend. Legend is less dangerous than recognition. Now they moved through the forest with a natural silence. Lucian's footsteps made no sound on the leaf-strewn path. Elena tried to match his grace and failed, snapping twigs, rustling undergrowth. Each sound made her flinch. You're breathing too loud, he murmured without turning. I'm breathing normally, exactly. But there was something almost amused in his tone. Stay close. The ravens have scouts in these woods. If they catch your scent before they see me, they'll assume you're prey. The House of Ravens, Elena said, remembering his explanation. They control this territory, have for a century. They made peace with the church by becoming myth stories told to frighten children, nothing more. Occasionally, a traveler disappears. Occasionally, a criminal vanishes from a locked cell. The ravens feed carefully, leave no evidence, and the humans tell themselves monsters aren't real. His voice carried bitter respect. It's effective. Soulless but effective. They reached the village outskirts as church bells tolled 11. Elena's father's house stood on the eastern edge, a modest 2-story building with his practice on the ground floor and living quarters above. Lights burned in the upper windows. Marcus was still awake. Lucian pulled her into the shadows of the apothecary across the street. From here, they had a clear view of the house's entrance and the two men standing guard outside. Local conscripts, armed with cudgels and self-importance. He's taking no chances, Elena whispered. He knows I might come back for the research. Good. Predictable enemies are manageable. Lucian studied the house with predatory focus. The journals, where would he keep them? My father's study. Second floor, facing north. There's a locked cabinet behind his desk. That's where he kept sensitive documents. And Marcus has been inside how long? 3 days, maybe 4. Lucian nodded slowly. Long enough to search, but not long enough to be comfortable. He's still establishing dominance, marking territory. The guards are for show. He doesn't really expect you. His eyes reflected ambient light, inhuman and calculating. We go through the back. There's a servant's entrance, kitchen door. It locks from inside. Not a problem. He glanced at her. I need you to do something difficult. Elena's stomach tightened. What? Trust me completely. For the next 10 minutes. Don't scream. Don't run. Don't question what you see. His hand found hers in the darkness, cold fingers lacing with warmth. Can you do that? She thought about the tomb, about his careful control, about the 200 years he'd spent starving rather than becoming what they'd feared. Yes. Then hold on. The world lurched. One moment they were in the alley. The next, Lucian had moved faster than thought, faster than possible, and Elena found herself pressed against his chest as the village blurred past. Wind screamed in her ears. Her stomach heaved. The ground disappeared and reappeared, and she realized with dizzy horror that he was climbing, using handholds she couldn't see, scaling the back of her father's house, like gravity, was a suggestion he'd chosen to ignore. Then they were on the roof, Elena gasping for air, Lucian barely winded, breathing loud again. He observed mildly. Yui, how she couldn't form complete thoughts. Vampire. He said it like that explained everything. Perhaps it did. Can you stand? She nodded, not trusting her voice. Her legs shook, but held. Lucian moved to the roof's edge, examining the window to her father's study. Locked. But the frame is old. I can force it without much noise. He looked at her. Once we're inside, you have 5 minutes. Gather everything essential. I'll keep Marcus occupied. Occupied? How? His smile was terrible. By being exactly what he's always feared, was hiding in the dark. He forced the window with a quiet crack of wood. They slipped inside, into her father's study, and Elena's heart broke anew. The room had been ransacked, books pulled from shelves, papers scattered, her father's careful organization destroyed. Marcus had torn through her father's life, looking for leverage, for secrets, for anything valuable. The locked cabinet hung open, its door splintered. No, Elena breathed, rushing to it. Her father's journals were gone, the research notes, the correspondence, everything. Elena. Lucian's voice was sharp. Footsteps. He's coming. She spun toward him, panic rising. The journals later. Hide. He pointed to the heavy wardrobe in the corner. Now. She dove for it as the study door opened. Through the crack in the wardrobe doors, Elena watched Marcus enter, holding a candle, wearing her father's dressing gown, like he'd already claimed ownership of everything. He looked tired, satisfied, completely unprepared. Lucian stepped from the shadows behind him. Hello, Marcus. His voice was silk over steel. We should discuss property rights. Marcus wheeled, candle dropping, flame dying. In the sudden darkness, Elena heard his sharp intake of breath, fear or recognition, or both. Who? Marcus's voice cracked. The guards are asleep. I was gentle. Lucian moved closer. Elena could barely see him, just a darker shadow in the lightless room. But I'm debating being less gentle with you. I'll scream. The whole village will find you in the morning, if they find you at all. Another step. Tell me about Elena, about the lies you told, about what you took from a dead man's house. Marcus backed against the desk. Elena saw his hand reaching for something, a letter opener, maybe, or a pistol. She's a murderer, a thief. She's standing in this room listening to you lie. Lucian's tone never rose, never hardened, which somehow made it more terrifying. She opened a tomb 3 nights ago, released something your grandparents tried very hard to forget. Now that something wants to know why you're sleeping in her father's bed, wearing his clothes, telling stories about her. You're insane. But Marcus's voice shook. There's nothing here. No one. Light bloomed suddenly. Elena realized Lucian had struck a match. held it to his own face. Marcus saw, really saw, the reflective eyes, the translucent skin, the inhuman stillness. He screamed. Lucian's hand covered Marcus's mouth, stifling the sound. Quietly now, we're having a civilized conversation. His other hand caught Marcus's wrist, preventing him from reaching whatever weapon he'd been groping for. The journals. Elena's father's research. Where are they? Marcus's eyes were wide, white-rimmed with terror. He made muffled sounds against Lucian's palm. I'm going to remove my hand. You're going to answer. If you scream again, I'll show you what 200 years of starvation does to one's patience. Lucian lifted his hand slowly. Marcus gasped for air. My house. I took them to my house. They're in my study, locked safe. I swear, where in your house? Second floor, West Wing. The combination is my sister's birthday. Words tumbled out, desperate. Please, I didn't know. I didn't realize she was that you were, that monsters were real. Lucian's voice was almost gentle. Now you know, and you're going to help us. Anything. Please, just don't write. Lucian released him, pushed him toward the desk. A letter to the magistrate, explaining how you falsified evidence against Elena, how you manipulated the investigation. Every detail, every lie, signed and sealed. They'll hang me. Marcus's voice was barely a whisper. Perhaps. Or perhaps you'll flee before dawn, start a new life somewhere your guilt won't follow. Lucian leaned close. But if you don't write, if you warn anyone, if you even think about crossing us again, I will find you, and I will take my time. Marcus's hand trembled as he reached for parchment and ink. Elena watched from the wardrobe as her tormentor wrote his own confession, witnessed by a vampire who hadn't fed into centuries and a woman who'd supposedly died in the forest. Justice, she thought, came in strange forms. When Marcus finished, Lucian took the letter, examined it, nodded. Good. Now the combination to your safe. Write it clearly. Marcus did. Excellent. Lucian folded both papers carefully. You'll sleep now. When you wake, you'll remember this as a nightmare, a warning. You'll leave this village within a week, and you'll never speak Elena's name again. Do we understand each other? Marcus nodded frantically. Lucian's hand touched his forehead, gentle, almost tender. Marcus's eyes rolled back. He slumped forward onto the desk, unconscious. Compulsion, Lucian said to the wardrobe. The House of Thorns considers it barbaric, but occasionally useful. He'll wake in an hour, confused and terrified. With luck, he'll run. He paused. You can come out now. Elena emerged on shaking legs. You could have killed him. Yes, but you didn't. No, Lucian looked at her across the darkened study. Because you were watching, and I needed you to see that control matters. That choices matter, even for monsters. She crossed to him, took the papers from his hand. Her father's vindication, written in the hand of his betrayer. Thank you. Thank me when we've retrieved the journals and escaped the territory of the House of Ravens. We've been inside too long. He moved to the window. Can you climb down? Or do I carry you? Elena remembered the dizzying journey up. Carry. Definitely carry. His arms caught her, cold and careful and impossibly strong. Hold tight. Chapter 6. The Ravens. Pricethy reached Marcus's estate an hour before dawn. Exhausted and running out of darkness, the house loomed at the edge of the village. New money trying desperately to look like old, all Gothic pretension and imported stone. 3 stories of borrowed prestige, surrounded by iron gates. That wouldn't stop a determined child, much less a vampire. Garish, Lucian muttered, studying it from the tree line. The architectural equivalent of shouting one's importance. Elena might have laughed if she weren't so tired. They'd moved quickly through the village, avoiding patrols, sticking to shadows. Her legs ached. Her wrapped hands throbbed. But they were close now. Her father's research. Marcus is safe, the proof they needed. The West Wing, she said. 2nd floor. Do you see there? Lucian pointed to a lit window. Someone's awake. A servant perhaps, or a guard making rounds. Can you compel them like you did Marcus? If necessary. But compulsion is imprecise. It works best on the terrified or the weak-willed. A dedicated guard might resist long enough to raise an alarm. He glanced at the lightening sky. And I'm running out of night. Another hour and I'll be fighting sleep. Vulnerable. Elena heard the admission beneath his words. I need you to do more than watch this time. What do you need from me? A distraction. Something that draws attention to the front of the house while I enter through the back. His eyes met hers. It's a risk. If they recognize you, they won't. I'll be hooded, distant. A figure in the dark is just a figure. She straightened, despite her exhaustion. What kind of distraction? Anything loud enough to seem urgent. A fire would work, but risk spreading. Breaking glass, perhaps, or he paused. Can you scream convincingly? After the past 3 days? I can scream very convincingly. Something flickered in his expression, approval or concern. She couldn't tell which. Then we move now. You approach the front gates. Scream as if you're being pursued. When they come to investigate, I go in through the servant's entrance. 5 minutes to find the safe, retrieve the journals, and return. He caught her wrist. If something goes wrong, if they catch you, run. Don't wait for me. Head west toward the old mill. I'll find you. And if they catch you, they won't, said, with absolute certainty. But if dawn comes before I return, leave without me. Find the safe house. Coordinates are in your father's journal, marked as refuge. Tell them what happened. They'll know what to do. Elena nodded, not believing for a moment she'd actually leave him behind. Lucien. Yes? Don't die. I've grown accustomed to having a terrifying immortal ally. His smile was brief but genuine. I'll do my best. Now go. And Elena, make it dramatic. Marcus's guards will be jumpy after finding him unconscious. She circled wide through the trees, approaching the front gates from an angle that kept her face hidden. Her heart hammered against her ribs. This was insane, reckless, everything her father had taught her to avoid, but her father had also taught her that sometimes the only way forward was through the fear. Elena ran toward the gates, let herself stumble deliberately, and scream. It wasn't difficult. She channeled 3 days of terror and rage and grief into the sound, let it tear from her throat like a wound opening. She screamed again, pounding on the iron gates, wild and desperate. Lights blazed in the house. Shouts echoed. Men appeared, 3 guards, pulling on coats, carrying clubs and lanterns. Help. Elena gasped, keeping her face turned away. Please, they're after me in the woods. Who's after you? The lead guard approached cautiously. Show yourself. Raiders. Bandits. I don't know, they killed my husband on the road. Chase me. She made her voice higher, younger, nothing like her own. Please, I need shelter, miss. Calm down. You're safe now. The guard fumbled with the gate lock. Where did this happen? Elena let him open the gate, let him reach for her arm, then jerked back, stumbling away. No, don't touch me, I can't. She ran, not toward the house but along its perimeter, drawing them after her, away from the back entrance. Behind her, the guards shouted, their lanterns bobbing as they pursued. 5 minutes, she thought. Lucien needs 5 minutes. She led them on a chase through Marcus's ornamental gardens, deliberately clumsy, letting them almost catch her before darting away. They thought her panicked, irrational. They had no idea she was buying time for something far worse than bandits to enter their master's house. Then she heard it, a sound that turned her blood to ice, a howl. Long, low, distinctly inhuman, rising from somewhere deep in the forest. The guards froze. So did Elena. Ravens, one whispered. Hunting call. Can't be. They don't come this close to the village. Not in years. Another howl answered the first. Closer now. And another, from a different direction. They were surrounded. Elena's mind raced. Lucien had said the House of Ravens controlled this territory, that they'd catch her scent. But he'd been with her, his presence masking hers, keeping her safe. Now she was alone, separated, exposed. Get inside. The lead guard grabbed her arm, no longer gentle. Now, all of us. They ran for the house. Elena pulled along whether she wanted to be or not. Behind them, shapes moved between the trees, fast, fluid, too large to be natural wolves. The front door crashed open. Servants stood in the entry hall, frightened and confused. The guards dragged Elena inside, slammed the door, threw the bolt, bar the windows. The lead guard ordered, wake the master. Tell him the ravens are hunting. Lucien, Elena thought desperately. Wherever you are, you need to hurry. A servant approached her with a blanket. Miss, are you hurt? Let me. Elena pulled back her hood just enough to meet the woman's eyes. Recognition flashed across the servant's face, shock, then fear. You, the woman breathed. You're the physician's daughter. The one they said was murdered by bandits. Yes. Elena's voice was steady despite her racing heart. Tragic story. I'm feeling much better now. The woman's scream brought everyone running. Elena found herself surrounded, guards with raised weapons, servants backing away, someone shouting for the magistrate. The lead guard grabbed her roughly, and she realized with sinking certainty that she'd traded one danger for another. Where is he? A new voice demanded. Marcus stumbled down the stairs, still wearing her father's dressing gown, his face pale and terrified. Behind him, another man followed, older, harder, carrying himself with military precision. The magistrate. She was at the gates, the lead guard reported, claiming bandits. But it's her, the murderess. I know who she is. The magistrate's cold eyes fixed on Elena. The question is why she's here, and why the ravens are circling my nephew's estate on the same night. Ellen opened her mouth to answer and the windows exploded inward. Glass showered the entry hall. Wind howled through the broken frames, and through the shattered windows came creatures that were wolves but weren't, larger than horses, eyes burning silver in the lantern light. The house of ravens had arrived. Screaming erupted. Guards swung weapons uselessly. The creatures moved with terrible purpose, ignoring the humans. Searching, one of them fixed on Elena. Its massive head swung toward her, lips pulling back from teeth like daggers. Then Lucien was there, dropping from the ceiling like judgment itself, landing between Elena and the creature. He held a leather satchel in one hand, her father's journals, she realized. In the other, nothing. He needed nothing. Enough. His voice carried through the chaos, cutting through screams and snarls. The girl is under my protection. Challenge me if you must, but leave her out of house politics. The creatures went still. All of them simultaneously, as if controlled by a single mind. A woman's voice spoke from the largest wolf's throat. Impossible, horrifying, perfectly clear. Lucien Draven. The rumors are true. The Thorn King walks again. Disappointed? Lucien asked mildly, intrigued. The creature's silver eyes gleamed. And curious why the last of the thorns would risk exposure for one human girl. She opened my door. That makes her mine, said with possessive finality. We're leaving. You can let us go. Or you can explain to the night courts why you started a war over territory no one's claimed into centuries. Silence. Tense. Dangerous. Then the woman laughed, a sound no wolf throat should make. Bold. Foolish. Very much the Lucien I remember. The creatures began backing toward the windows. Go. But know this, the House of Ravens is watching. And when you fail, when she betrays you or dies, or proves herself the liability we all know she is, we'll be waiting. They vanished as quickly as they'd appeared, leaving only broken glass and terrified humans. Lucien turned to Elena, tossed her the satchel. Can you run? She caught it against her chest, her father's life's work, finally reclaimed. Yes. Then run. They fled into the pre-dawn darkness, leaving chaos and questions in their wake. Behind them, Marcus collapsed against the magistrate, his carefully constructed lies crumbling with his courage. Ahead, dawn threatened, and the House of Ravens watched from the shadows, deciding whether the Thorn King's gamble was worth honoring or worth ending. Chapter 7. Shelter before storm. Dawn caught them 3 miles from the village, in a ravine choked with dead trees and winter-killed vines. Lucien stumbled, the first uncontrolled movement Elena had seen from him. His hand shot out to catch a twisted trunk, knuckles white with strain. His breathing had become labored, though she knew he didn't need to breathe, which made it worse somehow. A bodily failure overriding intention. How much farther? Elena gasped, clutching the satchel to her chest. Can't. The word came through clenched teeth. Dawn's here. I can feel it. He dropped to his knees, face contorted. The sun. Even underground, even in shadow, it pulls, like drowning in light. Terror spiked through her exhaustion. What do I do? Find darkness, deep darkness, cave, cellar, anywhere the sun can't. His eyes rolled back. He collapsed forward onto his hands, muscles locked rigid. Elena, quickly. She spun, searching the ravine with desperate eyes. There a gap between 2 massive boulders, half hidden by undergrowth. She dropped the satchel, grabbed Lucien under his arms, and pulled. He was impossibly heavy, dead weight in every literal sense. But fear gave her strength she didn't know she possessed. And she dragged him, inch by agonizing inch, across frozen ground, through thorns that tore at her skin, toward that promising darkness. The gap was barely wide enough. She pushed through first, felt the space open into a small hollow beneath the boulder's natural shelter. Maybe an old animal den, cold, damp, but completely black. Once she pulled enough brush across the entrance, she went back for Lucien, dragged him the final distance. His body had gone completely still, that terrible corpse stillness she'd witnessed in the tomb. By the time she collapsed beside him in the hollow, daylight was spilling through the ravine above, turning the world golden and deadly. They'd made it, barely. Elena lay in the darkness, gasping for air, every muscle screaming. Her hands were bleeding again through the bandages. Her dress was in tatters. She was fairly certain she'd lost feeling in her left foot, and they were alive, both of them. Somehow, she fumbled for the satchel, pulled it close. Her father's journals were safe inside, along with his correspondence, his research notes, all the proof they needed. Marcus's confession was folded carefully in her pocket. They had everything they'd risked their lives for. Now they just had to survive long enough to use it. Elena forced herself to check their shelter properly. The hollow was about 6 feet across, maybe 4 feet high at its center. Water trickled somewhere nearby. She could hear it but not see the source. The floor was dirt and stone, scattered with old leaves. Not comfortable but secure, defensible. She turned to Lucien. He lay on his back, eyes closed, hands folded across his chest, in that funereal pose. She pressed her fingers to his throat, felt nothing. No pulse, no breath, no sign of life. But he wasn't dead, just sleeping. The deep sleep he'd warned her about, vulnerable. Elena sat back against the boulder wall, watching him in the dim light that filtered through the brush covering. Without movement, without that careful control he maintained, she could see him clearly. The sharp angles of his face were softened by stillness. His dark hair fell across his forehead, tangled with dirt and leaves from their flight. He looked young, not the ancient creature he was, but maybe 30, maybe less, beautiful and broken and utterly still. You saved me, she whispered to his unconscious form. Confronted, Marcus, face the ravens, risked exposure. For journals, for my father's research. She pulled her knees to her chest. Or maybe for me. I can't tell anymore. The silence pressed in, complete and absolute. Above ground, the day continued without them. The village would be in chaos, Marcus's house destroyed, the magistrate demanding answers. Elena apparently returned from the dead. The ravens would be watching, waiting, deciding. And here, in the dark, they were safe. For now. Elena retrieved a journal from the satchel, opened it carefully. Her father's handwriting, precise, methodical, achingly familiar. She read by the thin light seeping through the entrance, losing herself in his theories, his observations, his careful documentation of everything he'd learned about vampire physiology. The blood of the House of Thorns contains properties unlike any other bloodline, he'd written. Where other houses feed purely for sustenance, the Thorns appear to form bonds, symbiotic relationships with their donors. Analysis of historical texts suggests these bonds provided mutual benefits, extended life for humans, emotional stability for vampires. The church called this corruption. I call it cooperation. Elena traced the words with her finger. You would have liked him, father. Lucien. He's everything you theorized, disciplined, principled, trying so hard to be more than what people fear. She glanced at the sleeping vampire. Though he's also stubborn, dramatic, and has a concerning tendency toward martyrdom. You would have lectured him about that. She read deeper. Found her father's notes on house politics, on the old treaties, on what had been lost when the church drove the vampires underground. Found his speculation that some bloodlines, the Thorns especially, had been trying to bridge the divide between human and vampire, to build something better than predation or persecution. Found his final entry, dated 3 days before his death. If I'm right, if the Thorns truly valued consent over conquest, then we destroyed something irreplaceable. And if any of them survived, if even one remembers what they were trying to build, perhaps there's hope. Perhaps the future doesn't have to be defined by the church's fear. Elena closed the journal carefully, pressed it against her chest. I found one, father. The last one. And I think, her voice caught. I think he's trying to remember. Trying to be what you believed was possible. Hours passed. The light shifted, strengthened, then began to fade. Elena dozed despite herself, exhaustion finally overwhelming adrenaline. She woke to dimness and the sound of her own breathing, and to Lucien's voice, soft in the darkness. You stayed. She turned her head. His eyes were open, reflecting what little light remained. He hadn't moved, otherwise still lying in that careful pose, but awake now, aware. Of course I stayed. Elena stretched cramped muscles. Where else would I go? The safe house. I gave you the coordinates. He sat up slowly, testing his body's responses. You could have left me here, taken the journals, saved yourself. And break up our dramatic partnership? Unthinkable. She tried for lightness, but her voice shook. Besides, you carried me up a building. Least I could do was drag you into a hole. Something shifted in his expression. You read your father's journals. How did you? You've been crying. I can smell the salt. He didn't move closer, just watched her with those ancient eyes. What did you learn? That my father believed in you, in the House of Thorns. That he thought the church destroyed something worth preserving. Elena met his gaze. That he spent his last years trying to prove vampires weren't the monsters everyone claimed. And what do you believe? The question hung between them, weighted with more than simple curiosity. Elena thought about the past 3 days. The tomb, the terror, the strange partnership forming between them. Lucien's careful control, his refusal to take without permission. His willingness to risk everything for journals he'd never read and a woman he barely knew. I believe, she said slowly, that you're trying very hard to be worthy of what my father believed. And I believe, she paused, surprised by her own certainty. I believe you might actually succeed. Lucien was quiet for a long moment. Then, the ravens will have reported to the other houses by now. They'll know I'm free, that I have a human companion, that we're moving through their territories. The night courts will convene. Judgments will be made. About us. About whether I'm a threat or an opportunity. Whether you're leverage or liability. He finally moved, shifting to face her properly in the darkness. The safe house is 2 days' travel. We'll move at night, hide during the day. If we're lucky, we'll reach it before the other houses decide our fate. And if we're not lucky, then we fight, we run, we survive however we can. His hand found hers in the dark, cold fingers wrapping around warm. But we do it together, partners, not master and servant, not vampire and prey. Equals, facing whatever comes. Elena squeezed his hand, felt the impossible strength tempered by deliberate gentleness. Partners, she agreed. Though I should warn you, I'm terrible at following orders. I'd noticed, his thumb traced across her knuckles. Elena, what the ravens said, about you being mine, that was politics. Territorial posturing. You're not property. You're not bound to me. I know. Then why stay? Why risk everything for someone you've known 3 days? She thought about this. About Marcus and betrayal. About her father's faith and the tomb's darkness. About the strange safety she felt in Lucien's presence, despite everything logic said she should fear. Because for the first time in months, she said quietly, someone asked what I wanted. Someone gave me choices. Someone treated me like I mattered. She looked at him in the dimness. You're not perfect, Lucien. You're controlling and dramatic. And you have 2 centuries of trauma you've never processed. But you asked permission. You warned me. You gave me the power to say no. That's a low bar for partnership. Chapter 8. Blood and Boundary traveled through the second night in tense silence, moving through territories Elena couldn't distinguish. But Lucien navigated with unerring instinct. He was slower than before. She noticed him pause more frequently, his hand bracing against trees, his breath coming harder despite not needing air. Starvation was catching up. There's a stream ahead, he said as midnight approached. We'll stop. You need water. I'm fine. You're limping. Your hands are infected. His voice was flat, factual. We stop. The stream cut through a clearing ringed by ancient oaks. Moonlight silvered the water, made it look almost magical. Elena knelt at the bank, unwrapped her filthy bandages, and hissed as cold water hit the inflamed cuts. Lucien stood at the clearing's edge, keeping watch, keeping distance. Tell me about the night courts, Elena said, trying to fill the silence. My father's journals mention them, but not in detail. They're what passes for vampire government. Each house sends representatives. Disputes are arbitrated, territories negotiated, laws enforced. He didn't turn around. The House of Thorns held the balance of power for 3 centuries. We were peacekeepers, mediators. When we fell, the other houses divided our influence. Do you think they'll help us? I think they'll do whatever serves their interests. If my research and your father's journals represent value, they'll protect us. If we're more trouble than we're worth, he let the implication hang. Elena dried her hands carefully, wished for proper bandages. The cuts were angry and red, showing early signs of infection. Her father would have treated immediately. She had nothing, no supplies, no medicine, no way to prevent it from worsening. Elena, Lucien's voice had changed. Gone tight. Your hands. The infection. I can smell it. It's not that bad. It will be. In 2 days, maybe less, fever will set in. Then delirium. Then he stopped. There are things vampire blood can heal. Infections, wounds. The House of Thorns used it medicinally carefully. Controlled doses. She understood what he was offering. Your blood. A few drops mixed with water. It won't change you. Won't bind you. Just accelerate healing. He finally turned to face her. Your father's journals documented the process. He knew the protocols. Elena looked at her damaged hands, thought about fever and delirium, and dying in some forest hollow before they reached safety. What does it cost you? Giving blood when you're already starving? His jaw tightened. Nothing I can't afford. Liar. Elena, you can barely stand. You're moving slower every hour. Whatever reserves you're running on, they're almost gone. She stood, walked toward him. So tell me the truth. What does giving me your blood cost? He looked at her for a long moment. Everything I have left. But the alternative is watching you die from something easily prevented. That costs more. The honesty hit her harder than she expected. Then we find another solution. I'll be careful. Keep them clean. It's too late for careful. His hand caught her wrist gently, but firm. Let me help you. Please. The please undid her. This ancient powerful creature, asking permission, offering himself despite the cost. Elena thought about partnership, about trust, about the strange bond forming between them that she couldn't quite name. On one condition, she said. His eyes narrowed. What condition? After you heal me, I help you. Fair exchange? She met his gaze steadily. You give blood. I give blood. Partners, remember? No, the word was immediate, absolute. Elena, you don't understand what you're offering. I understand you're starving. I understand. We have 2 more days of travel and you're barely functioning. I understand. She took a breath. I understand that partnership means both of us survive. Not just me. I won't take from you. Then I won't take from you. She pulled her wrist free. We're both stubborn, Lucian. We can stand here arguing until dawn, or we can help each other and keep moving. He closed his eyes, conflict written across his features. The House of Thorns has laws. We don't feed from those who are frightened, coerced, or unclear about what they're consenting to. I'm none of those things. You're exhausted, injured, and we're being hunted. Your judgment is compromised. My judgment, Elena said firmly, is that I trust you, that I want to survive, and that I want you to survive. She held out her hand. Heal me, feed from me, or we both die slowly in these woods. Choose, Lucian. The silence stretched between them, taut as a wire. Then he moved, drew a small knife from his coat, ornate, clearly ancient, probably the same blade he'd carried for centuries. He pressed the point to his wrist, drew a thin line. Blood welled, darker than human blood, almost black in the moonlight. Drink, he said quietly. Just a few drops. Elena knelt beside the stream, let him drip his blood into her cupped palm mixed with water. It tasted of copper and something else, something almost electric, like lightning captured in liquid form. She swallowed, felt warmth spread through her chest, down her arms, her hands tingled. The pain faded. She watched in amazement as the cuts began to close, angry red fading to pink, then pale white scars. It's working, she breathed. Thorn blood is particularly effective for healing. It's why other houses wanted us eliminated. We made humans harder to kill. He closed his own wound with a touch, but she saw the cost. He swayed slightly, caught himself. There, you'll be fine now. Your turn. Elena, she was already rolling up her sleeve, exposing the inside of her elbow. You said the House of Thorns values consent. I'm giving it, clearly, without coercion, fully understanding what I'm offering. She met his eyes. Unless you're saying my consent doesn't matter? That's not fair. Neither is watching you collapse from starvation because you're too proud to accept help. She held out her arm. I trust you, Lucian. Prove I'm right. He looked at her offered arm like it was both salvation and damnation. If I start, if I can't stop, you will. Because that's who you are. Elena kept her voice steady. The House of Thorns. Consent or starvation. You've proven it for 200 years. Trust yourself the way I trust you. His hands trembled as they caught her arm. He knelt before her, his height making them nearly level. Tell me to stop, he whispered. At any point. Promise me. I promise. He bent his head to her arm. She felt his breath, cold, unnecessary, but present. Then his lips. Then the sharp, precise pain of teeth breaking skin. Elena gasped, but didn't pull away. The sensation was strange, not exactly painful, but intense, intimate. She felt her pulse in the place where his mouth connected to her flesh, felt each draw of blood like a tide being pulled by the moon. Lucien's hands tightened on her arm. She heard a sound from him, something between relief and anguish. 2 centuries of starvation, ending in this moment, in this clearing, with her blood running through him for the first time since he'd been sealed away. Time blurred. Elena felt lightheaded, but not weak. Watched the stars will overhead. Felt strangely peaceful, despite everything logic said she should feel. Then Lucien pulled back, deliberately, with visible effort. His tongue traced the wound, and she felt it seal beneath the touch, another gift of vampire blood, she realized. Healing even while taking. He released her arm, sat back heavily. Blood stained his lips. His eyes were brighter now, more alive, reflecting moonlight with renewed intensity. "Thank you," he said hoarsely. "I thank you." Elena examined her arm. Only a small white scar remained where he'd fed. "How do you feel?" "Stronger, clearer." He looked at his hands, flexing fingers that no longer trembled. "I can think again, move properly. I didn't realize how much the starvation had degraded my function until he stopped." "Are you all right?" "Dizzy, but okay." She smiled slightly. That was either incredibly stupid or incredibly brave, both probably. Lucien stood, offered his hand. When she took it, he pulled her up carefully. "We should keep moving. The scent of blood will attract predators, and I'd rather not fight tonight." They walked in different silence now. Something had shifted between them, not quite intimacy, but a deeper understanding. A bond forged in blood and trust and mutual vulnerability. "Lucien," Elena said after an hour. "The House of Thorns. When you fed from people, was it always like that? That careful? Always?" "We developed protocols over centuries. Medical precision combined with absolute consent. It made us effective healers. We could take enough to strengthen ourselves while giving enough blood back to accelerate human healing." His voice carried old pride. "Other houses thought us weak, said we denied our nature. But we thought being civilized meant choosing how we expressed that nature. My father would have loved you," Elena said softly. "The whole house, everything you were trying to build, perhaps. Or perhaps he would have seen the flaws I couldn't. The pride that made us inflexible. The idealism that made us vulnerable." Lucien glanced at her. "But I'm grateful he raised a daughter willing to see past monster stories. Willing to offer trust when she had every reason to withhold it. You gave me blood when you had nothing to spare. Seems fair to return the favor." Is that all it was? Fairness? Elena considered this. The truth was more complicated: curiosity and compassion and something harder to name. A desire to prove her father right, maybe. Or a need to show Lucien he wasn't alone. That someone believed in what he'd been trying to preserve. Chapter 9. The breaking point. They were half a day from the safe house when the House of Vipers found them. Dawn was still 2 hours away. But Elena felt it in Lucien's increasing urgency. The way he kept checking the eastern horizon. They'd been moving through dense forest, following a path only he could see, when he suddenly stopped. "Run," he said quietly. "What run?" The trees exploded with movement. Figures dropped from branches, emerged from shadows, surrounded them with inhuman speed. 6 of them, maybe more, moving too fast for Elena to count. Not wolves like the ravens. These were human-shaped, but wrong movements too fluid, eyes too bright, smiles too wide. The House of Vipers. Lucien had described them during their travels: masters of poison, assassination, secrets. The house that traded in information and death. A woman stepped forward, beautiful in a way that made Elena's skin crawl. Dark hair, darker eyes, wearing clothes that seemed to shift colors in the moonlight. "Lucien Draven, the night courts are very interested in your resurrection." "Cassandra?" Lucien's voice was ice. "Still doing the house's dirty work, I see. Someone has to maintain order while idealists like you sleep away the centuries." Her gaze shifted to Elena. "And this must be the human. The physician's daughter. The one who bleeds on ancient doors and reads forbidden journals." She smiled. "Hello, Elena. Your father's research is quite fascinating. We've been trying to acquire it for decades." Elena's blood turned cold. "How do you know about the House of Vipers?" "Knows everything, child. It's what we do." Cassandra circled them slowly, predatory. "Your father was careful, but not careful enough. We knew he was researching vampire physiology. Knew he'd found references to the old houses, to the Thorns especially. We would have approached him eventually. Offered him protection in exchange for his findings, you would have killed him, Elena said flatly. Perhaps. Or perhaps we would have seen his value. We'll never know now. Cassandra's smile never wavered. But his daughter, clever, desperate, apparently immune to survival instinct, she opens the Thorn King's tomb, retrieves the journals, bonds with the last of a dead house. That's worth something. We're not interested in deals, Lucian said. Let us pass, Cassandra. We're going to the safe house. We have right of sanctuary. Sanctuary requires Night Court approval, which requires you to present yourself for judgment. She stopped circling, faced them directly. The houses are divided, Lucian. Some want you dead, you represent a threat to 2 centuries of carefully maintained secrecy. Others want you controlled, your knowledge, your bloodline, potentially valuable. And a few, her gaze flicked to Elena, want the girl. Her father's research could change everything about how we interact with humans. For better or worse, she's under my protection. Your protection means nothing. You're one vampire with no house, no allies, no leverage. Cassandra's voice hardened. Surrender the journals and the girl. Return to your tomb. We'll seal it properly this time. Ensure you sleep another 200 years. When you wake, perhaps the world will be ready for your particular brand of idealism. No, Elena's voice surprised her with its steadiness. The journals belong to me. My father's legacy belongs to me. You can't have them. Bold. Cassandra's smile turned sharp, but ultimately irrelevant. You're human, child. You have no rights here. No voice in house politics. Your property or food or leverage, depending on which house claims you first. Lucian moved faster than Elena could track. One moment he was beside her, the next he was between her and Cassandra, teeth bared, eyes blazing. She's a person, not property. Touch her, and I'll remind you why the House of Thorns held the balance of power for 3 centuries. The other vipers moved closer, forming a tighter circle. Elena counted 7 now, maybe 8. All of them focused on Lucian with predatory intensity. You're outnumbered, Cassandra said. Weakened. You fed recently, we can smell her on you, but 1 meal after 2 centuries of starvation doesn't restore full strength. You'll lose this fight, Lucian. Surrender gracefully. I don't surrender. And I don't repeat mistakes. Lucian's hand found Elena's, grip tight. Elena, the satchel. Hold it close. She clutched her father's journals against her chest. What are you when I move? You run. North. Don't stop. Don't look back. The safe house is 5 miles. Follow the stream. Tell them what happened. They'll protect you. I'm not leaving you. You have to. His eyes met hers, ancient and sad and absolutely certain. The journals matter more than I do. The research matters. Your father's work matters. Get it to safety, please. Lucian, he kissed her. Hard and fast and desperate. She tasted blood on his lips, hers or his. She couldn't tell. Then he pushed her away, turned back to the vipers, and smiled like the king he'd been. Let's discuss the balance of power, he said softly. He moved like lightning given form. Faster than the vipers expected, hitting Cassandra first, sending her flying into a tree with bone-breaking force. The others converged, but he was already spinning, using speed and fury to compensate for numbers. Run. He roared. Elena ran. North, following the stream, clutching the satchel, tears streaming down her face. Behind her, she heard the sounds of combat impacts that shook trees. Snarls that weren't quite human. Lucian's voice raised in something between a war cry and a death song. She ran until her lungs burned and her legs gave out. Collapsed beside the stream, gasping, sobbing. She'd left him to fight alone, to possibly die because he'd asked her to save paper and ink instead of him. Partnership. She'd promised partnership. And she'd run. Elena forced herself upright, looked back the way she'd come. The sounds of fighting had stopped. Complete silence hung over the forest, the kind of silence that followed something terrible. She should keep going. Reach the safe house. Honor his sacrifice. But her father had taught her that some debts couldn't be paid by running. And she'd traded blood with Lucian, fed him and been fed by him, created a bond that wasn't just politics or strategy. She'd called him partner. She'd kissed him back. She couldn't leave him. Elena turned around. Started walking back toward the fight, toward probable death, toward the vampire who'd saved her life repeatedly and asked for nothing but her survival in return. The clearing came into view. She crept closer, staying hidden, and felt her heart stop. Lucian was on his knees, surrounded by vipers. His coat was torn, his face bloodied. 3 vipers lay unconscious or dead nearby. He'd taken some with him at least. But there were too many. They'd overwhelmed him through sheer numbers. Cassandra stood before him, holding a silver blade. Last chance, Lucien. Where did she go? He spat blood at her feet. Find out yourself. Brave. Stupid. Very thorn-like. She raised the blade. The night courts will understand. You attacked first. We defended ourselves. And the human girl died in the forest. Tragic. Really, along with her father's dangerous research. The blade descended toward Lucien's heart. Elena didn't think. She grabbed a fallen branch, thick, heavy, better than nothing, and charged into the clearing, screaming. The vipers turned, surprised. Elena swung the branch at the nearest one, connected with satisfying force. The vampire stumbled. She swung again, wild and desperate, creating chaos. Elena, no. Lucien's voice carried anguish and fury. I told you to run. I don't follow orders, remember? She ducked under grasping hands, kicked at knees, fought like something feral. Partnership means we both survive, or neither of us do. Cassandra laughed, genuinely amused. Oh, she's perfect. No wonder you're smitten. Girl, you're going to die for a vampire who can barely stand. Is that really how you want your story to end? Better than abandoning someone, Elena faltered, realized what she'd almost said. Someone I trust. How touching. Cassandra gestured. 2 vipers grabbed Elena, pinned her arms. Watch carefully, human. See what happens to idealists in our world. She turned back to Lucien, raised the blade again, and the forest erupted with howls. Ravens, dozens of them. Massive wolves pouring into the clearing from every direction. They hit the vipers with coordinated precision, driving them back, breaking their formation. Cassandra screamed orders. But the ravens were relentless. The wolf woman's voice spoke from multiple throats simultaneously. The House of Ravens claims sanctuary for Lucien Draven and the human Elena. Challenge us if you dare. Vipers. Cassandra's face twisted with rage. This isn't your territory. All territories are our territory when we hunt. Stand down, or we'll remind you why the vipers hide in cities while we own the wild places. For a moment, Elena thought Cassandra would fight. Then she lowered the blade, gestured sharply. The vipers melded back into the forest, carrying their wounded, leaving curses in their wake. The ravens remained, dozens of silver eyes reflecting moonlight. The largest wolf approached Lucien, shifted, bones cracking, form flowing until a woman stood where the beast had been. Tall, scarred, wearing furs and ancient confidence. Lucien Draven. You're either very brave or very stupid to make such noise in contested territory. Lady Morgana. Lucien bowed his head despite his injuries. I owe you a blood debt. Yes, you do. Her gaze shifted to Elena. And you, little human. You came back for him. Foolish, loyal, interesting. She tilted her head. The House of Ravens will escort you to the safe house. We'll collect our debt later. When you're less pathetic. She shifted back to wolf form, moved to Lucien's side. Other wolves flanked them, forming a protective circle. Chapter 10. Refuge and Revelation. Safe house appeared like a dream from the morning mist, a stone manor half swallowed by forest. Ancient and solid, with lights burning in windows that suggested warmth and safety beyond. The ravens left them at the gate as dawn broke. Lady Morgana shifted long enough to speak. Remember, Draven, you owe us. We'll collect when the time is right. Then they were gone, vanishing into the trees like smoke. Lucien stumbled against the gate. Elena caught him, felt how much the fight and the journey had cost him. Almost there, she murmured. Just a little farther. The gate swung open before they reached it. A figure emerged, small, ancient, human. An old woman with silver hair and eyes sharp as glass. She took one look at them and skecked. Lucien Constantine Draven. 200 years and you still arrive at my door broken and bleeding. Some things never change, Grandmother Iris. Lucien's smile was exhausted, but genuine. Still alive, I see. Spite and stubbornness keep me breathing. Her gaze shifted to Elena. And you must be the physician's daughter. Helena's granddaughter, if I'm not mistaken. You have her eyes. Elena blinked. You knew my grandmother? Knew her? Child, she helped build this safe house. Come inside, both of you, before you collapse on my doorstep and make me drag you. She turned with surprising speed for someone who looked 90. And Lucien tried not to bleed on the carpets. They're Persian, The interior was exactly what Elena hadn't expected: warm, lived in, filled with mismatched furniture and stacks of books and the smell of bread baking. More home than fortress. A fire crackled in a massive hearth. Other figures moved in the shadows, humans and vampires both, she realized. Living together, working together, proof that what her father had believed was possible actually existed. Sit, Iris commanded, pointing to a sofa near the fire. You, she nodded at Elena, look exhausted, but whole. You, she fixed Lucian with a stern look. Look like you've been through a war. Multiple wars. When did you last feed properly? 3 hours ago. Elena fed you herself. Yes, I can smell the bond forming. Iris disappeared into another room, returned with bandages, herbs, a basin of water. Foolish children. Do you know what you've done? Blood sharing creates TIs, especially between thorns and humans. It's not just feeding, it's the beginning of something deeper. Elena's stomach dropped. What do you mean, deeper? The House of Thorns didn't just take blood, girl. They formed partnerships. True bonds. Give enough blood over time, receive enough in return, and the connection becomes permanent. Emotional, sometimes even telepathic. The church called it corruption. The thorns called it covenant. Iris began cleaning Lucian's wounds with practiced efficiency. You've started something that can't easily be undone. Lucian wouldn't meet Elena's eyes. I should have warned her. Explain the risks. Would it have mattered? Iris asked sharply. Would either of you have chosen differently? You were both dying in your own ways. The blood saved you both. Now you live with the consequences. Elena processed this, trying to understand. What consequences? What does this bond mean? It means you'll feel his hunger, his pain, his fear. It means he'll feel yours. Iris moved to bandage a particularly nasty cut on Lucian's ribs. It means separation will hurt. Distance will ache. You're tied now, whether you want to be or not. The bond can be managed, controlled, even eventually severed, but it requires work and time and usually help from other thorns. She paused. Which is problematic, since Lucian is the last one. Silence filled the room except for the fire's crackle. Elena felt something shifting in her chest, not quite pain, but awareness. Of Lucian's exhaustion, his guilt, his fear that he'd trapped her in something she hadn't chosen. I knew the risks, Elena said quietly. Maybe not all of them, but enough. My father's journals documented bond formation. Partial at least. She looked at Lucian. And I offered anyway, freely. I won't blame you for accepting what I gave. His eyes finally met hers, grateful and anguished in equal measure. The bond will strengthen if we continue sharing blood, or it will fade slowly if we stop. The choice is yours. No, Iris interrupted. The choice is both of yours. Partnership, remember? She finished the bandagging, sat back with a heavy sigh. Now, the journals. Let me see what Helena's son discovered that has the houses in such an uproar. Elena retrieved the satchel, handed over her father's life work. Iris opened the first journal, began reading with the intensity of a scholar encountering lost scripture. Minutes passed. She moved to the second journal, then the third. Her expression shifted from curiosity to shock to something like hope. This is extraordinary, she breathed. He documented everything. Bloodline differences, healing protocols, consent frameworks, historical treaties. This is the most comprehensive vampire research since the Purge. If the Night Courts see this, they'll kill us, Lucian said flatly. This knowledge proves vampires can coexist with humans. That threatens every house that's built power on secrecy and fear, or, Iris countered, it gives the progressive houses ammunition. Proof that the old ways weren't just idealism, they worked. They created stability, mutual benefit, actual civilization. She closed the journal carefully. You need to present this to the Night Courts. Make your case. Show them what could be rebuilt. They'll never listen, Lucian said. I tried that before. It got my entire house killed. That was 200 years ago. The world has changed. Humans have grown stronger, more numerous. Vampires have grown weaker, more divided. The old balance is breaking. Iris leaned forward. The houses need a new path forward. You're offering one. They might kill you for it, but they might also embrace it. If you present it correctly. Elena felt Lucian's despair through their forming bond. He can't do it alone. One vampire with no house, no allies, they'll dismiss him as a relic. Then he needs allies. Iris smiled. The House of Ravens is already interested. They protected you. That's significant. And there are others. Vampires and humans both who remember the old treaties, who believe coexistence is possible. She stood, moved to a bookshelf, pulled out a ledger. I've been maintaining a network for 50 years. Merchants, scholars, minor houses who feel the night courts have grown too rigid. With this research, we might convince enough of them to matter. A coalition, Lucian said slowly. Like the one the House of Thorns tried to build. Exactly. But this time, you won't be alone. Iris opened the ledger, showed pages of names, locations, affiliations. And this time, you have proof. Scientific documentation. A human physician's legacy supporting vampire-human partnership. Elena looked at the ledger, at her father's journals, at Lucian sitting exhausted and wounded by the fire. Felt the bond between them fragile, new, promising connection or entanglement depending on how they shaped it. What do you need from us? She asked. Time. 2 weeks to send messages, gather allies, prepare your presentation to the night courts. Iris moved to the fire, added wood with practiced ease. The House of Ravens will need convincing they're pragmatic but cautious. The House of Mirrors might be sympathetic, they value knowledge, history. The House of Vipers we avoid entirely, they're too invested in the current power structure. And when we present to the courts? Lucian asked. What then? Then you make them see what Helena's son saw. What the House of Thorns always knew. Iris turned to face them, firelight making her look younger, almost fierce. That monsters aren't born from nature, they're made from isolation, fear, and the absence of hope. You offer hope, Lucian. The hope that vampires can be more than predators hiding in shadows. And you, she looked at Elena, offer proof that humans can see past fear to recognize personhood. Elena felt the weight of it. Her father's legacy. Lucian's survival. The possibility of changing how the species saw each other. And if we fail, then you die. Probably painfully. And the world continues as it is, vampires fading into myth, humans forgetting the lessons of coexistence, everyone poorer for the loss. Iris smiled grimly. But if you succeed, you might build something worth the risk. Something your father dreamed of. Something the House of Thorns died trying to achieve. Lucian reached for Elena's hand. She took it, felt the cold of his skin, the bond humming between them like a plucked string. Partners? He asked. Partners, she confirmed. Until the end. Whatever that looks like. Touching, Iris said dryly. Now both of you sleep. You look half dead, well, more than usual in your case, Lucian. There are rooms upstairs. Separate rooms, she added, with a pointed look. The bond is forming, but you're not married. I run a respectable establishment. Elena felt herself blush. Lucian had the grace to look embarrassed. 2 weeks, Iris continued. Use them to heal, to prepare, to decide exactly what you're fighting for. Then we take your case to the night courts and see if the world is ready for what you're offering. She ushered them upstairs, showed them to adjacent rooms. Elena's was small but clean, with a real bed and windows overlooking the forest. She collapsed onto the mattress, still holding her father's satchel, and felt sleep pulling at her. Through the wall, she sensed Lucian settling into his own room, felt his exhaustion, his cautious hope, his fear that this fragile alliance might crumble before it had a chance to matter. We'll make it matter, she thought, not sure if he could hear through their bond. We'll prove my father right. We'll show them what partnership looks like.